From Kern Government Television, welcome to this week's Kern County Board of Supervisors meeting, originating from the County Administrative Center located at 1115 Truxtun Avenue, Bakersfield, California. Kern County's vision is to create and maintain a customer-centered county government designed to garner the confidence, support, and trust of the people we serve. Today's Kern County Board of Supervisors meeting will convene momentarily.
Okay, board to reconvene. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Supervisor Peters.
Here.
Supervisor Scrivener.
Here.
Supervisor Maggard.
Here.
Supervisor Couch.
Here.
Supervisor Perez.
Here.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Tuesday, April 13th, 2 p.m. meeting of the Kern County Board of Supervisors. We will first hear from County Counsel Margot Raison for a report taken on action in closed session.
Good afternoon, Chairman Peters, board members. This morning, you met in closed sessions on items 77, 78, and 80. As you announced earlier, 79 was withdrawn. There was no reportable action for items 77 and 78. However, for item number 80, there were 3 items considered. And in regards to one of those matters, approval was given to initiate legal action. However, pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.1, the defendants and other particulars need not be disclosed at this time. However, once any action is formally commenced, the defendants and other particulars may be disclosed upon inquiry unless doing so jeopardizes our ability to effectuate service or would compromise settlement negotiations.
Thank you very much. The County of Kern has provided notice that as a result of the declared federal, state, and local emergencies due to the COVID-19 pandemic and in light of the governor's orders, this Board of Supervisors meeting is not physically open to the public. Testimony and general public comment are accepted via voice message or email to the clerk of the board's office prior to today's meeting, and live comments via teleconference will be heard during the meeting. We will begin by considering the consent agenda. All items listed with a CA above the items are considered routine and non-controversial by county staff. Consent items will be considered first and may be approved by one motion. If a member of the public wishes to comment or ask questions regarding an item on the consent agenda, they may do so prior to a vote being taken. A member of the board may remove any item from the consent agenda, and it will be considered in listed sequence with an opportunity for any member of the public to address the board concerning the item before action is taken. A member of the public may also comment on any closed session item. At this time, I will read the consent agenda item numbers. That is items 5 through 7 on page 3, on page 2, 6 through 9 on page 3, 8 through 13 on page 4, 14 through 16 on page 5, 17 through 23 on page 6, 24 through 27 on page 7, 28 through 33 on page 8, 34 through 42 on page 9, 43 through 49 on page 10, and 50 through 59 on page 11. Additionally, item number 47 has been pulled from the consent agenda and will be heard in numerical order. And I would like to turn to our Director of Planning Department for a quick update regarding, I believe it's consent item number 12.
Thank you. Lorelei Oviatt, Director of Kern County Planning and Natural Resources. So SB 467, Weiner and Lyman, which would have banned hydraulic fracturing and cyclic steam, was heard in committee today. It was held over, which is essentially failing. What that means is it cannot be considered again until January 1st, 2022. We will be sending the chair a letter, if you take action on this, up to the committee to reinforce for the record your opposition to this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, are there any members of the public wishing to speak to the consent agenda?
No, sir. We have no members wanting to address the board concerning any consent agenda items.
Okay. Are there any board members that would like an item removed for discussion?
Nothing to remove, Mr. Chairman, but I would move approval of the consent agenda.
Second. Thank you. Please cast your votes.
Thank you. The motion is approved. All ayes.
Great. The board will now consider item number 1, public presentations. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons to address the board on any matter not on this agenda, but under the jurisdiction of the board. Board members may respond briefly to statements made or questions posed. They may ask a question for clarification, make a referral to staff for factual information, or request staff to report back to the board at a later meeting. Also, the board may take action to direct staff to place a matter of business on a future agenda. Speakers are limited to 2 minutes. Please state and spell your name before making your presentation. Madam Clerk, have we received any public comment?
Mr. Chairman and members of the board, we do have one member of the public wishing to address your board under public presentations. Mr. Bart Sullivan is in the queue. Mr. Sullivan, if you would unmute your phone by pressing *6, you have 2 minutes to address the board. Mr. Sullivan, if you can hear me, you need to press *6 on your phone in order to unmute the line, and then you'll be able to address the board. It still shows that you're in Teams, that your mic is muted, your phone is muted. Mr. Chairman, I'm not seeing any movement on the unmuting of the phone. My suggestion is that Mr. Sullivan hang up and redial, and we'll see if we can get him on the line so that he can be heard.
Okay, yeah, we'll do that. And does that conclude public comment for right now?
Yes, that's everyone I have. He was the only caller wanting to address the board under public comment.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we will now consider item number 2, board member announcements or reports. Are there any comments or reports from Supervisor Maggard?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm glad Mr. Pope is here. I'd like to talk about a growing issue that I'm sure we're all aware of, but it specifically affects Mr. Pope's department, and that is the just rampant illegal dumping that we see around our community. It used to be that it was in our rural areas, but it's not any longer. It's everywhere. So I'd like to brainstorm, we don't have to solve at this moment, Mr. Pope, but I'd like you to give us some ideas, come back and give us some ideas about, is it curbside pickup? Is it a different rate at the gate? Could it be regional bulky item drop-off stations? I don't know what it is, but we need something to provide an alternative so people just don't dump this stuff out like they are now. And is that something that, Mr. Pope, you think you could come back to us with in a few weeks and give us some ideas about your thoughts?
Through the chair to Supervisor Maggard, yes, we'd be glad to. It is something that we work on daily to try and figure out solutions, and we're coming back, not just with one idea, but many different approaches.
I'd love to hear what those ideas are, and we'll look forward to seeing what we can figure out. Thank you, Mr. Pope.
Thank you, Supervisor Maggard. Supervisor Scrivener?
Craig, don't go too far. I got one for you. I'm sorry. I just out of convenience, and I apologize, but I got a request for us to look at some trash issues on Mill Potrero Highway up in the, I think, Fraser Park, Pine Mountain Club area. And so can you give me a ring when we get offline, and I'll try to give you some coordinates on that?
I'll be glad to.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Any other comments or reports? Okay. We will now consider item number 3, a request from Kern County Planning and Natural Resources to amend Chapter 4 of the approved Kern County General Plan and Metropolitan Bakersfield General Plan housing element covering the 2015 through 2023 planning period. This amendment to the approved vacant land inventory list identifies additional high-density residential zoned parcels within Kern County that are zoned for high-density housing development countywide. And with that, I will turn it back over to Lorelei Oviatt.
Thank you so much. I'm here today with Craig Murphy, Assistant Director, who will make this presentation and answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Oviatt, members of the board. The project before your board today is an amendment to the Kern County housing element. Specifically, the request is intended to clarify the amount of existing higher density development that is zoned that way that is available for housing. The current housing element was adopted in 2015 for the required planning cycle of 2015 through 2023. The next update is due in 2023. This document provides the identification and analysis of existing and projected housing needs and includes a statement of goals, policies, and implementation programs that enable the county to meet its RHNA, its Regional Housing Needs Allocation. This does include the requirements of special needs groups and all economic segments of the county. The housing element itself has two purposes. The first is to provide for an assessment of both current and future housing needs and the constraints in meeting those needs. The second is to provide a strategy that establishes housing goals, policies, and programs, including the identification of appropriately zoned land for future development as housing sites. The housing element represents the Kern County's long-term commitment to the development and improvement of housing. This element identifies strategies and programs that focus on preserving and improving housing in neighborhoods, providing adequate housing sites, assisting in the provision of affordable housing, removing governmental and other constraints to housing investment, and then promoting fair and equal housing opportunities. At the request of HCD, the State Housing and Community Development Department, staff is proposing an amendment to the adopted housing element based on a review by staff that the identified parcels included in this staff report represent previously unidentified R3 designated parcels that were inadvertently excluded when our existing housing element was adopted in 2015 due to a GIS mapping error. In short, the layers didn't quite align exactly, so when there was that little bit misalignment, when we ran our database search, those parcels did not show up as being zoned R3 lands. What I'd like to do right now is to take a minute to discuss the $650,000 the department received as part of our SB2 grant. Over the course of this year, staff is looking to develop a number of programs to assist the development of affordable housing from these funds. The identified projects that we're looking for are a further review of the amount of zoned land for single-family and multifamily development, a review of the current process for discretionary processing of multifamily housing, including development of expedited development standards, the creation of a searchable GIS-based inventory of vacant infrastructure-ready residential lots. We want to look to streamline our density bonus review and increase the general plan-based density for multifamily zone districts. And we want to create a streamlined process for the development of tiny homes under 900 square feet. The final item is the creation of an online fee calculator to show pathways for fee reduction strategies and fee transparency. What I'd like to do right now is discuss the most recent letter that we received today from Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability, questioning some of the information that's been presented to your board today. In a review of the letter, I do not believe that the commenter reviewed the presented information in its entirety or as a whole. For example, the letter specifically stated that parcels 114-193-17, 138-040-20, 138-280-22, and 142-190-03 should not be counted, as these parcels are not viable for development because of their lot configuration or the fact that they were already built on. What the commenter failed to do was realize that in the attached spreadsheet that we provided, all of those parcels that they mentioned were given a development capacity of 0 for the very reason that they had identified. So while they were on our list, the staff assumption was that 0 development would be included on those parcels given those outlining constraints. Another example, APN 518-112, which may or may not be part of an existing road, was inadvertently reviewed as a single parcel and not reviewed as part of a block of 5 adjacent parcels that would total a combined 1.60 acres, as again specified in that spreadsheet. We have noticed we have a number of projects that where parcels are located next to each other. The developers are able to combine those parcels into a single larger site to develop various residential programs. And again, I don't believe that the commenter realized that in providing their comments. Again, all of these parcels were included on the list because they are existing high-density zone sites that were not included when the housing element was adopted in 2015, and our development partners have become very creative when it comes to development of these lands. Finally, what I'd like to do is point out that the development of affordable housing is not a one-size-fits-all approach. The comment letter continually states that affordable housing sites need to be high-density residential parcels of a certain size and criteria. However, on page 5 of your report, staff has listed the 5 most recent projects that are either under development or will be developed within the next 2 years. These developments are all being facilitated by Golden Empire Affordable Housing or the Kern County Housing Authority. As a reminder, the county itself does not develop individual sites. Rather, we contribute in our capacity as a governing agency to distribute the funding that assist in making these developments possible. The projects listed in your staff report include a mix of R3, R2 zone property, commercially zoned property, and properties ranging in size from 0.10 acres to 2.84 acres. Again, based on our review, the comments submitted, only the Stevens Drive Cottages project would meet that specific criteria that has been identified in the comment letter. And clearly, we've been able to find ways to facilitate development on properties that are outside of the criteria that are being identified. In conclusion, I just want to point out that staff is not rezoning any parcels at this time. That would require potentially a general plan amendment and further seeker review. Rather, at the request of HCD, staff has identified previously high-density zone parcels that should have been included in our housing inventory back in 2015. All of the comments have been provided to your board today, including a legal response from our outside counsel. The State Housing and Community Development Agency, which is legally responsible to review the housing element, supports this amendment, has not found the element deficient. A copy of these actions will be provided to HCD directly. Finally, staff will continue to work with all our community partners as we implement our SB2 funded projects and as we prepare beginning in 2022 for the 2023 update. At this time, staff recommends your board adopt the resolution and recommended findings, approving the general plan amendment as requested. That completes staff's presentation, and I'm available for any questions if your board has any.
Okay, thank you. So just to clarify, is the action the board needs to take, is that opening a public hearing or is it adopting the resolution? It's the public hearing. Okay. So we'll now open the public hearing on this item. Madam Clerk, is there anybody wishing to speak to this item?
Yes, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, you have received written documentation from Emma De La Rosa with Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability. Ms. De La Rosa is also queued in to speak to your board regarding this item. So at this time, Ms. De La Rosa, if you would unmute your phone by pressing *6, you may address the board.
Good afternoon. We urge the board to not approve this amendment to the housing element. Kern County has been out of compliance with the housing element for the last 5 years and has faced a shortage for suitable land for multifamily housing for more than 6 years. To meet the shortage of land, the county adopted the programs 2.2.2 and 2.2.3. These programs were supposed to be completed 2016 and 2018 respectively. As of date, the county has not complied with these programs. Rather than rezoning suitable land for high-density housing as adopted, the county has tried to meet the shortage by submitting other housing development sites to HCD, some which were not accepted, and is now attempting to amend the housing element with this site inventory without conducting a full analysis pursuant to HCD guidelines, not to the Housing Authority points system. Since the county is obviously apathetic about housing element law, I invite you to take a look at the photos that we sent in our letter. Supervisor Perez, Maggard, and Scribner, the planning department believes that your low-income constituents can live on canal banks and near water sumps. Chair Peters, land sites in your district show to overlap on roads and have also not been appropriately evaluated for environmental constraints, such as fires for sites in Lake Isabella. Supervisor Couch, your low-income constituents can live next to water tanks on small parcels of land behind single-family homes. The staff report claims all of these sites are vacant. However, according to the GIS system, there are about 12 parcels that are not vacant. Lastly, the county is not upholding its obligation to affirmatively further fair housing. All of the sites in the inventory within Bakersfield County pockets are in low opportunity areas. In fact, the 5 future housing projects referenced in the staff report are also located in low opportunity areas. It is important to meet this housing shortage to address the housing crisis in the county and ensure your constituents can access affordable housing. A lack of housing in our communities is no longer a funding issue, but rather a lack of compliance from the county. Next time the board is discussing homelessness and housing crisis, consider complying with the housing element law as a solution. Again, we ask the Board of Supervisors to not approve this amendment. Also, I want to highlight that this was a waste of county resources, and we all know that waste is something that we should not be taking part in. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, that concludes public comment on this item.
Okay, thank you. So the public hearing is now closed. Are there any questions or comments from the board? Okay.
I do.
Oh, Supervisor Perez.
Thank you. Lorelei, that was a lot of information. I didn't catch it all. I'm not sure how much you caught. Can you respond as best you can to those concerns, please?
Supervisor Perez, through the chair, Mr. Murphy did respond to the specific allegations that we are attempting to put low-income housing on a canal. They have misread. We appreciate that there was a lot of information in the staff report. I would note that up until now, Mr. Murphy has worked directly with this community group. We believed that we were doing what this community group had asked. We have created an inventory. The parcels that she is referring to are actually zero, meaning we are not taking credit for them. And at the end of the day, we are moving forward with our SB2 money. We have now also been given a LEAP grant of $750,000, which we are still waiting for the agreement from the state, which we'll use for infrastructure planning so that we can try to get infrastructure to perhaps even just the design for roads and other issues that will support our partners in building housing. At the end of the day, we were as affected by anyone by the pandemic. We have, over this year, managed to keep all of our planning programs going, and the general plan has lagged. We will continue forward with the general plan. Under the general plan, we will be identifying property owners that own land that would be appropriate for multifamily and high density. As you note, your board has experienced the opposition of the public to these kinds of projects, and to your credit, your board has never denied a low-income project. We do believe that we are fulfilling our obligations under the housing element, and we are doing what we can with our partners in the private sector who are bringing money. The amount of money that your board has to build housing is approximately $2 million a year. This money has to be matched with other grants and other projects. I would note that the projects that Mr. Murphy mentioned, Pioneer Cottages and other projects, will come to a halt if the housing element is found inadequate. HCD is aware of this. They have indicated to us that our housing element is not inadequate, and we will continue to work with these groups as we proceed through the general plan. And at that point, we will be able to fund the environmental impact report that's necessary for the general plan amendments and zone changes to work with property owners who want to up density their lots. I would point out that we do not expect that to be an effortless activity, given the feeling that people have about placing these types of projects next to their communities. We took none of that into account. This analysis that you've received is absolutely based on sewer, water, location, making sure we have enough all over the county, and takes into account no possible opposition or other sorts of things that have been alluded to in these letters that we've received from this group. We appreciate their diligence. We appreciate all the work that they put into this collaboration, and we'd ask that they go back to a collaborative posture and work with us as we finish the general plan over the next year and then begin the environmental impact process. And with that, I believe that Mr. Murphy can read the recommendation again for your board to consider.
The recommendation would be to adopt the resolution and recommended findings approving the general plan amendment as requested.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions or comments from the board? Supervisor Scrivener?
I'll move staff's recommendation.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I thought you were buzzing in. Please cast your votes.
Thank you. The motion was, I believe this motion was seconded by Supervisor Couch, and the vote is all ayes, so the motion carries.
Great, thank you. Sorry, Dave, I didn't hear you. Okay, at this time, before moving to item 4, I would ask that we reopen public presentations. I believe we have Mr. Sullivan on the line.
Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. We're going to go back to public presentations, and we do have Mr. Bart Sullivan waiting in the queue. Mr. Sullivan, if you would unmute your phone by pressing *6, you have 2 minutes to address the board.
Okay. I believe I'm unmuted now.
Yes,
My
sir.
name is Bart Sullivan. My name is Bart Sullivan. There's been a mix-up with what my name actually is, so I didn't receive notification of the Board of Supervisors meeting on February 23rd, which was about me. My name is actually Bart Sullivan, not F.O. Sullivan. And so I didn't receive the letter that invited me or notified me of your Board of Supervisor meeting on February 23rd. So I'm asking to set up a date where I can actually be there at the meeting. My prior emails notified code enforcement of what my name was. My checks had my real name on it. And I had a personal conversation with a member of the code enforcement and told him I wanted to know when the date was for this meeting. And he said he would call me, and I made him aware of what my real name was in case he wanted to mail me something.
Does that conclude your comment, Mr. Sullivan?
Yes, so again, I'm asking to set up a date where I can actually be there at the meeting that was about me on February 23rd.
Okay, I appreciate your comments. I would like to call on our county counsel, Margot Razon, if you have any input on that. I'd appreciate it.
Thank you, Supervisor or Chairman Peters. Mr. Sullivan has filed a claim for reimbursement with the county. It's been referred to my office for handling. As such, that makes the matter in the litigation mode, and I believe it would be best at this point for my office to handle it in accordance with our practice and policies of how we get a claim, we respond. I also have Deputy Brian Van Wyk on the remote call-in if the board has any more particular questions about the matter. He's very familiar with the underlying action and can answer those questions.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from the board on this?
I would just say, Mr. Chairman, this looks like this is in my district, this particular property that's in question. And so I have confidence in county council to hand it through their channels. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Okay. Next, we will consider item number 4, a request from Finney Arnold LP to appeal the decision of the hearing officer for vesting tentative parcel map number 12371, which proposed to divide an approximate 20-acre site for commercial use located on the south side of Rosamond Boulevard between Eagle Way and 25th Street West in the Rosamond area. Director Oviatt.
Thank you so much. So as noted, this is an appeal of a parcel map decision by Finney Arnold, who represents Citizens for a Safer Rosamond. This is a total of 20 acres, but the site itself that has been developed is 4.5 acre portion of the site, which is currently under construction with a retail development and was approved in a prior decision by Precise Development Plan number 16, map number 230-20, and modification of Precise Development Plan number 16, map number 230-20. The remainder of the site's undeveloped. As noticed, this is at the Rosamond Boulevard between Eagle Way and 25th Street. This is across the street from the main shopping center in Rosamond, which has the only shopping center, the only grocery store, which is in Albertsons Vaughan. This particular site, if Mr. Murphy can show the construction, will have a grocery outlet, a Starbucks, an O'Reilly's Auto Parts, and a 7-Eleven, all of which will be completed and operational in the 1st of July. Some of them will be operational the 1st of July. As you can see, this project is almost finished. You cannot see there are major road improvements that have been made on 25th Street, which is a main road, as well as Eagle Way. The project before your board is only the parcel map, the moving of lines on a map to create new parcels. At the director's hearing on February 18th, 2021, it was considered by the hearing officer, and the appellant raised objections and indicated with letters that you've received, including one as recently as that we've provided to you, that all of the traffic impacts and environmental impacts have not been analyzed for this parcel map, and that the construction itself needs to be analyzed. In reality, a previously approved project, which is now under construction, the environmental impacts were already analyzed under that precise development plan. It's a designated commercial site and has been designated since 2008. The development occurring on the site has gone through 2 public hearings. Those environmental impacts were addressed at the precise development plan. No objections were raised at that time. And the project that is subject to CEQA is the subdivision of this parcel map only. Since the precise development plan, which is the construction, was not challenged during the statutory time limit under CEQA, it cannot be challenged now, and as the project grading has been completed for the entire parcel map and construction with building permits has commenced. The parcelization of this property for financing purposes will not result in any impacts that have not already been analyzed or mitigated, and the age which he has brought up of the legally certified final EIR for the Rosamond specific plan does not have hearing on its validity. You've been provided from a legal opinion from the applicant, from the law offices of Allen Matkins, Leak, Gamble, Mallory, and Natsis, confirming staff's decision on this CEQA, and I quote, "Any objection to the parcel map on CEQA grounds comes far too late in the process, so late that any lawsuit or other legal maneuvers purportedly based on CEQA would be subject to malicious prosecution consequences. Further, the impacts of the parcel map itself are non-existent. The granting of the application simply moves lines around on a piece of paper and does not by itself create any significant impacts, environmental or otherwise." We have provided you with all the comments. I do believe, if we can confirm with the clerk, that the appellant, Mr. Finney, is on the line.
Yes, he has called in.
Thank you. So at this time, we have facilitated this appeal. He has made this appeal timely. Your decision is de novo, meaning that you can approve this parcel map or deny this parcel map based on the evidence before you. We do believe that it fully complies with CEQA and the CEQA findings that we have made, and there is no further environmental review that needs to occur. Therefore, our recommendation is to deny the appeal, adopt resolution and recommended findings, approving vesting tentative parcel map number 12371, subject to the recommended conditions of approval. We would ask that you take the appellant, Mr. Finney, representing Citizens for a Safer Rosamond, first. The applicants are on the line if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we will now open a public hearing. And Madam Clerk, would you bring up the first caller?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we do have Mr. Finney waiting in the queue. Mr. Finney, if you would unmute your phone by pressing *6, you may address the board. And I also wanted to let you know the letter that you submitted has been submitted to the board members. They all have a copy of that letter.
Great. Did that work? This is Mr. Finney. Are you guys able to hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, I wanted to thank the board and the chair, staff for giving us the opportunity to address you today. We're appealing the decision to proceed with the project, as staff stated, and with respect to the specific vesting tentative parcel map number 12371, which they've raised with you here today. We understand that you have determined the approvals to be ministerial and not discretionary. For this reason, despite the pendency of our appeal dated as of March 1st, 2021, wherein we requested an appeal of the approvals pending a legally adequate environmental review of the project, the Planning and Natural Resources Department issued a decision, notice of decision, dated March 5th, 2021, an NOD, wherein the Planning Department determined the approvals to be final. This is evidently based on the Planning Department's understanding that the approvals are entirely ministerial in nature, but this is not the case. The California Public Resources Code, Section 21080A, determines that the California Environmental Quality Act applies to discretionary projects. Subdivision maps are specifically included on that list as discretionary. Except as otherwise provided in this division, I'm now quoting from the statute, this division shall apply to discretionary projects proposed to be carried out or approved by public agencies, including, but not limited to, the enactment and amendment of zoning ordinances, the issuance of zoning variances, the issuance of CUPs, conditional use permits, and the approval of tentative subdivision maps, unless the project is exempt from this division. Section 21080B then goes on to state that CEQA does not apply to ministerial projects to be carried out or approved by public agencies. The project under consideration is not one of the types of projects denoted therein to be ministerial. Furthermore, the determination as to whether or not an action by a lead agency is either discretionary or ministerial has been well litigated. AB 889 was the legislative bill that created PRC Section 21080. This particular section was added to AB 889 by amendment in the Senate on November 13th, 1972, when CEQA basically started out. This section read in this initial version in pertinent part as follows. This division shall apply to all discretionary projects proposed to be carried out by public agencies, including, but not limited to, the enactment and amendment of the zoning ordinances, the issuance of the zoning variances, the issuance of conditional use permits, and the approval of tentative subdivision maps. This division shall not apply to non-discretionary ministerial projects proposed to be carried out by the public agencies, including in the approval of final subdivision maps. That's the Friends of Westwood case versus the City of Los Angeles, 191 Cal. 3rd 259. Note that the California legislature made a distinction between tentative subdivision maps, and the planning department seeks to approve an existing tentative parcel map, not a final subdivision map, which is right out of the language of the legislative history. The counter item is vesting tentative parcel map number 12371, proposing to divide an approximate 20-acre site into 4 parcels, ranging in size from 36,333.4 square feet to 1.58 acres for commercial use, and a 14.43-acre gross designated remainder located in a C2PD General Commercial Precise Development Combining District. The fact that the approvals involve a vesting tentative parcel map renders the approvals discretionary, not ministerial. The determination triggers CEQA. Therefore, our clients' concerns regarding the lack of a proper environmental review are timely and accurate. CEQA determines when its provisions no longer apply to a project, not the lead agency. The lead agency, in this case the county, must be responsive to the requirements of CEQA throughout the duration of a project, as long as discretionary decisions continue to be made until such time as the project is complete. I can go on further with the legislative history, but I wanted to focus now that the California Code of Regulations, Title 14, Division 6, is also dispositive on the subject of ministerial versus discretionary decisions by a lead agency. As a whole, these CEQA guidelines are consistent with the interpretation of ministerial, which flows from the purpose and legislative history of PRC Section 21080. The CEQA guidelines at Section 15357 define a discretionary project as one which requires the exercise of judgment or deliberation when the public agency or body decides to approve or disapprove a particular activity, as distinguished from situations where the public agency or body merely has to determine whether there has been conformity with applicable statutes, ordinances, or regulations. It goes on to further define ministerial versus discretionary, and it significantly states that the guidelines provide where a project involves an approval that contains elements of both a ministerial action and a discretionary action, the project will be deemed to be discretionary and will be subject to the requirements of CEQA. Thus, if part of the approvals were discretionary, not just all of it, and part was ministerial, the entire approvals are still considered discretionary, and so CEQA still applies. Putting all these guidelines together, it can be seen that the Governor's Office of Planning and Research, which I was the director of, and I wrote the CEQA guidelines when I was there, considers the approvals presumptively ministerial only where the lead agency has no power to exercise its personal judgment as to the manner any phase of a project is carried out, but instead only has the power to determine whether the statutes allow the structure to be built and whether the developer has satisfactory statutory requirements and nothing more, and then only when those decisions involve application of fixed standards and objective measurements. Such is not the case here. The notice of decision issued on March 5th is illustrative of the director's personal judgment as to the manner of the approval, denial, or alteration of the vesting tentative parcel map underlying the approvals. This was not a determination that the developer had merely complied with certain fixed standards or objective measurements. This was a determination that the documents underlying the approvals met with certain subjective criteria and that the vesting tentative parcel map shall be approved. Prior judicial decisions likewise have adopted a restrictive definition of ministerial projects considered exempt from environmental review. The California Supreme Court has held CEQA must be interpreted in such manner as to afford the fullest possible protection to the environment within the reasonable scope of the statutory language. That's the Friends of Mammoth versus Board of Supervisors of Mono County case, 8 Cal 3rd at 259. Following this mandate, other courts have established the principle that CEQA applies even where the process is largely ministerial. As one court held, statutory policy, not semantics, forms the standard for segregating discretionary from ministerial functions. CEQA is to be interpreted to afford the fullest possible protection to the environment within the reasonable scope of the statutory language. So basically, Section 21080 extends CEQA's scope to hybrid projects of a mixed ministerial discretionary character, such that any doubt whether this project is ministerial or discretionary should be resolved in favor of the latter characterization. And that's another case, People v. Department of Housing and Community Development, 45 Cal App 3rd at 185. As our comments demonstrate, the project approvals cannot be granted until the public has been provided with enough time and information to review the project, to provide public agencies and the public in general with detailed information about the effect which a proposed project is likely to have on the environment, and to list ways in which the significant effects of such a project might be minimized pursuant to the Laurel Heights case. For these reasons stated herein, the association respectfully requests the project approvals be set aside on a legally adequate environmental review be performed on the project. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan, Mr. Finney. I would like to refer back to Director of Planning Lorelei Oviatt for any other comments on that.
Thank you so much. No place does the word ministerial appear in our staff report. This is clearly not a ministerial action, and it was never presented as a ministerial action. Your board is very conversant with the difference between discretionary and ministerial. Parcel maps are always discretionary. In this case, a notice of opportunity is sent out, and the public is permitted to ask for a hearing. We did have a hearing, and that is a discretionary action. We have provided you with findings utilizing the Special Situation 21166 and 21083.3 and Section 15183 of the State CEQA Guidelines, which allows us to use the Rosamond Specific Plan Environmental Impact Report as a CEQA finding. We agree with Mr. Finney. This is not a ministerial project. This is a discretionary project, which is why it is before your board. Our zoning ordinance does not permit the appeal of ministerial projects to your board, except in very specific cases. If you go to page 8, these are de novo proceedings. These are findings that you must make. These are judgment determinations that have to be made. They are discretionary. Parcel maps under the Subdivision Map Act, however, have limited discretion, not the kind of discretion that you have under a general plan. You must make one of these findings in order to deny this project. The findings that you see on 1 through 5, we believe can be made for this parcel map. Once again, no place, any place in this staff report or the director's hearing staff report or in the public notice was the word ministerial used, and this is not a ministerial project. It is a discretionary project. We have looked at the Rosamond Specific Plan. The age of an EIR does not invalidate it, and therefore the final Rosamond Specific Plan EIR covers the parcelization. This is a parcel map because it is commercial, and that is the appropriate vehicle, tentative parcel map. Therefore, unless the applicant has, the applicant or the applicant's attorney has additional comments that they wish to make, that completes staff's presentation, and we would be available for questions.
Thank you, Ms. Oviatt. Are there any other speakers that are waiting to address the board, Madam Clerk?
Yes, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, I have 2 additional speakers. We're going to start with Jim Halferty. Mr. Halferty, if you would unmute your phone by pressing *6, you may address the board.
Good afternoon. Are you hearing me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Honorable Supervisors, I'm Jim Halferty. My firm, Halferty Development Company, is excited to be an active business enterprise in Rosamond. In the past 4 years, we've constructed over 40,000 square feet of retail facilities in Rosamond, in addition to the present project that features 7-Eleven, O'Reilly Auto Parts, Starbucks, and Grocery Outlet. And this project, by the way, is almost completed. We provided a new and updated facility for Rite Aid Pharmacy approximately 4 years ago in Rosamond. As has been previously stated by staff and sent to you in a letter from my attorney, Patrick Breen, the vesting tentative map does not create a significant environmental impact. We are simply moving lines on a map. You've also heard the appellant did not avail itself of their remedies when they had the opportunity to do so. I think that's an important fact. In fact, they provided no opposition when there were public hearings to determine whether or not this project would be approved. Never heard a word from these people in writing or in person. So if the developers must abide by rules and procedures, so should project opponents. Otherwise, we'll have chaos in the community. I request that you deny the appeal that is before you and give final approval to this vesting tentative map. Let's be done with this.
Thank you, Mr. Halferty. Are there any other speakers?
Yes, our last speaker is Mr. Pat Breen. Mr. Breen, if you would unmute your phone by pressing *6, you may address the board.
Thank you very much. As Mr. Halferty stated, I represent the project developer. We have submitted 2 letters to the county supporting the approval of this vesting tentative map. And in addition, we countered all of the claims that have been made by the project opponent. And I will now refer briefly to a couple of the guidelines that Mr. Finney referred to earlier and that he said he had a hand in drafting. He refers to the definition of discretionary project, which is found at guidelines section 15357. Immediately above that, in section 15352, the CEQA guidelines define approval. And specifically, subsection B says, with private projects, approval occurs upon the earliest commitment to issue or the issuance by the public agency of a discretionary, and then there are a series of terms including lease, permit, license, certificate, or other entitlement for use of the project. That occurred back in January of 2020, specifically January 16th, 2020. As Ms. Oviatt stated, prior to that approval, there were public hearings, there was consideration of the discretionary acts and the environmental consequences of those acts that the county undertook. That approval, final on January 16th, 2020, the longest statute of limitations under CEQA ran in June of 2020. So we're now 15 months after project approval, 9 months after the statute of limitations has applied, and we now have a project opponent coming in to try and stop this project. In addition, as both Ms. Oviatt and Mr. Halferty said, this project is near completion. Construction has been ongoing. The developer has spent millions of dollars. The users of the project have spent substantial sums, over $1 million, in getting their projects ready for a grand opening, which is now slated for July 22nd of this year. Any environmental impacts of this project, construction noise, traffic, et cetera, were all considered by the county in the run-up to January 16th of 2020. The decision was made then. The current project opponents did not object then. They did not exhaust their administrative remedies, and they did not file suit. What we have here is an after-the-fact desire by someone to try and stop the project for their own reasons. The current approval in front of this board has already is a part of the Halfordy project that was approved on January 16th of 2020. And we find that in, again, the definitions of the guidelines that Mr. Finney cited, specifically section 15378, which states that project means the whole of an action, which has the potential for resulting either in a direct physical change in the environment or a reasonably foreseeable indirect physical change. That is, again, what the county studied prior to approving the project 15 years ago. The current approval before the board is a part of that project, the environmental consequences of which have already been studied. And the current project, quite literally, is only the moving of lines on a map. The physical environmental consequences and impacts have previously been studied. The statute of limitations has run. The petitioner or opponent here has not exhausted its administrative remedies. And on behalf of the developer, I respectfully submit that this current approval should be approved promptly and that the project be allowed to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Breen. Are there any other callers?
That concludes public comment on this item.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the public hearing is now closed. Are there any questions or comments from the board?
Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Supervisor Scrivener.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This project's in my district. I just want to ask if the planning department, Ms. Oviatt, has any additional comments. Otherwise, I'm prepared to make a motion.
I do not. Thank you, Supervisor Scrivener.
Thank you. And so I'll move that the denial of the appeal and adopting the resolution and recommended findings, approving vesting tentative parcel map number 12371, and subject to the recommended conditions of approval.
Thank you. Is there a second? Okay, please cast your votes.
The motion is approved. All ayes.
Thank you. We will now consider item number 47, a public hearing on a proposed resolution and ordinance granting a 20-year non-public utility pipeline franchise to Cal Biogas Buttonwillow LLC. Mr. Hill.
Good afternoon, Chairman Peters, members of the board. The item before you today is a hearing on the franchise agreement for Cal Biogas's use of county road right-of-way for the installation of a biogas pipeline. This franchise is allowable under State Franchise Act of 1937 and Government Code Section 26001. On March 9th, the draft ordinance was presented to your board with a notice of hearing and a resolution of intent for the franchise. That action also set the hearing date for the franchise as today, April 13th. The pipeline franchise is approximately 20 miles long, and this franchise only addresses the portions that are in the county right-of-way. It is generally located around Schofield, Magnolia, Lerdo Highway, and 7th Standard Roads. The various documents have been reviewed by County Council and Planning and Natural Resources prior to today's meeting. Kind of an intro to the action, and I'll now turn it over to Director Oviatt for some additional comments.
Thank you. Director Oviatt?
Thank you, Chairman Peters. Before I address the letter that's been submitted, perhaps we could open the public hearing and take public comment.
Great. Okay, we'll now open the public hearing. Madam Clerk, is there anybody wishing to speak to this item?
Yes, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, Emma De La Rosa, representing Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability, has submitted a letter which you have in front of you. She is also in the queue ready to address your board. Ms. De La Rosa, if you would unmute your phone by pressing *6, you may address the board.
Board of Supervisors, we're asking you to oppose the Cal Biogas Buttonwillow Pipeline franchise. Our opposition is based on the county's incorrect finding that the project is exempt from environmental review pursuant to CEQA. The county's failure to fully assess and ensure mitigation of environmental impact of the pipeline franchise and the significant impact the project will have on already burdened communities. The staff report determined that the pipeline franchise is exempt from the provisions of CEQA pursuant to sections 15301 and 15061B3. Section 15301 provides a category exemption for the operation, repair, maintenance, or minor alteration of existing public or private structures, facilities, and mechanical equipment involving negligible or no expansion of existing or former use beyond that existing at the time of the lead agency's determination. Here, the Planning Department is recommending the approval of an entirely new project. Section 15061B3 of the CEQA guidelines states that a CEQA exemption only applies where it can be seen with certainty that there is no possibility that the activity in question may have a significant effect on the environment. The pipeline franchise is not exempt under Section 15061B3 since the project does in fact have the potential of causing a significant effect on the environment. Gas leaks from pipeline transports are common and can lead to serious environmental impact as a result of the gas leak. A biogas leak can result in high levels of methane released into our air, and biogas leaks have the potential to cause explosion as a result of gas mixtures in confined spaces. The staff report does not assess any impact of gas production or transport, nor does it include a discussion on mitigation strategies for gas leaks or monitoring parameters of biogas pipes or tanks. The county must conduct a full environmental impact review to ensure that gas production and transport will not lead to serious environmental impacts. The county's unlawful use of CEQA exemptions will cause environmental and public health harms. Without a full environmental review, communities that will be most impacted by this project will not have an opportunity to inform its development and ensure adequate environmental, health, and safety protections. Again, we urge the board to oppose this biogas franchise. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers?
No, sir. That concludes public comment on this item.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I will turn back to our Planning Director, Lorelei Oviatt.
Thank you, Chair Peters, members of the board. As noticed, this project is a franchise agreement for a biogas pipeline. Because of the timing of this franchise, there is an additional permit, ministerial permit, that this project requires. What is before your board is the paperwork needed for your board to authorize an agreement with Cal Bioenergy to pay for the use of the public access easements to have a pipeline. However, on April 7th, 2021, the amendments to Title 19, Chapter 19.98 Oil and Gas Activities became effective, and they are fully applicable to this biogas pipeline. An oil and gas conformity review permit under that chapter will be required before any construction begins. All impacts associated with the construction of and operation of the pipeline will be mitigated under the Supplemental Recirculated Environmental Impact Report 2020-2021. The letter that you have received actually mischaracterizes the action. There is no increase of herd size associated with this action, and nor can it be. All activities on the dairy for a digester itself are covered by Section 19.12.130G, which permits this type of dairy digester by right as a ministerial permit. This change to the ordinance was made more than 14 years ago, never challenged during the hearing process, and it legally can be used for this project. The letter appears to link biogas digesters to increases or modifications of herd sizes. I'd like to take this opportunity to give your board an update on our dairy industry. The last dairy or modification to any dairy in unincorporated Kern County was in 2004, 17 years ago. Any new dairy or modification to increase herd size requires a conditional use permit and a full environmental impact report. To date, this department has no such applications and has not done a preliminary review on an application over the last 17 years. Biogas digesters on existing dairies, by covering the lagoons and capturing the gas, reduce the VOCs emitted by that lagoon by 80%. Many of these dairies were permitted before zoning requirements and without environmental review under those existing zoning ordinances. Supporting dairy digesters is a way to mitigate the ongoing air impacts of these operations that your board cannot now change or condition. Further, the 2019 Agricultural Commissioner's Crop Report shows that milk products in unincorporated Kern have a value of $570 million. The dairy industry continues to be a core industry for Kern County and does not need to increase their herds, apparently, to continue to profit. They do, however, need to move forward into the new world of addressing the climate change gases that their operations produce. The San Joaquin Valley Air District has estimated that one digester at a dairy of approximately 3,000 cows, which is a small dairy in Kern County, reduces NOx emissions equivalent to taking 89 cars off the road. The displacement of diesel by CNG trucking fleets further reduces NOx by the equivalent of 5,971 cars, and a cluster of dairies, of digesters with 24,000 cows reduces NOx emissions equivalent to taking 41,000 cars off the road. The exemptions cited are appropriate to the franchise agreement action, and no construction can occur without an oil and gas conformity review, which is fully covered by a final EIR. We are adding 15303, which is existing small construction, to the exemption, and I note that 15301, which is existing, 15301, which is new small construction, we are adding. 15301, which is existing, covers the paving. Some of these are existing paved roads. We are just would put the biogas pipeline in and replace the paving. Your board can take action today based on the whole of the record as sufficient and legal under the California Environmental Quality Act, and all of the construction and operational impacts of this biogas pipeline will be covered by the supplemental recirculated oil and gas final EIR. Mr. Hill can provide you with the recommendation language as amended.
So the recommended action is open the hearing, receive public comment, which you've done, close the hearing, make finding that the action is exempt from further CEQA review per 15301, 15303 added, and 15061B3 of the state CEQA guidelines to adopt the resolution and enact the ordinance. We would also request that that we revise the resolution to include the CEQA exemption 15303. It's the end of our prepared comments. If there's any questions.
Thank you. Well, I will go ahead and close the public hearing because I don't believe I did that earlier. Are there any questions or comments from the board? Okay, seeing none, I would entertain a motion.
Of approval.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Please cast your votes.
The motion is approved. All ayes.
Okay, having no additional items to consider, I will entertain a motion to adjourn to Tuesday, April 27th at 9 a.m. Perfect. Okay, without objection, we are adjourned.